All right, we're into the first slide, and the second one you know all about because it's the same as it was yesterday.
Okay.
What we're going to try tonight, I've just talked about, but you'll get an extended session where you do the work this evening because we're going to create 3 separate layers and then add a feature to each. In fact, you won't create the third one because you did that yesterday, but
The polygon, yeah.
yeah, but we will do the other 2 and you can see the differences between them. All right, so that's completely waste of time. Back into the main system. Along the top, this is what we're talking about for the menus all the way along the top here. And the first one is rarely used, and I have no name for it other than hamburger, which is what our American cousins call this icon. And you'll notice that clicking on it just removes the left-hand column. So it's a way of giving you maximum screen space on the map. However, since you're using that left-hand column quite frequently for data amendment and additions and so forth, I'm not sure how often everyone uses this. I haven't used it for real myself, but you never know. So I've clicked it back to revert it back to a column, and we're moving on to the view menu, which is the first sort of working one, if you will. Okay. And arguably, this is one of my favorite places, bookmarks. So I'll click on bookmarks. And bookmarks is a way of saving the place where you happen to be at this current moment in time. So it records which layer you have in place, or which layers plural. It records where you are. It records which scale you're on, so that just by clicking on the bookmark, you come straight back to exactly the same place as it was when you left. And since there's about 5 or 6 mouse clicks necessary to get to that place, otherwise, it's a great time saver. So when you go into bookmarks, if there are any all there already, they'll all pop up like the ones you see in the left-hand column. Okay. And then to create a new one, you just go ahead and put a name in. You'll see that what I've done is mostly planning applications, but not entirely. And just to show you how it jumps from where you currently are to the place where you want to be, I've indicated down the bottom there's a little place called Thorney, and you're on a scale of 1,000 meters to that distance. If we click on this one, we immediately jump completely away from Thorney. We're now on a much bigger scale, 50 meters in that distance. And the particular planning application that we're highlighted, we wanted is right here. So you jumped straight to it. Big time saver. Indeed. A couple of problems with bookmarks. The first is that they don't sort them in any specific order. You don't have the facility to sort them in any order that you want, and they just arrive in what looks like a haphazard arrangement, but I guess it's probably chronological. Not a great use to you if you've got hundreds of bookmarks like I have. So there is a facility you're a Mac user, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yep. So Command F will bring up the search facility outside this particular application, but it will apply to it. So if you go ahead and hit Command F, which I'm just doing now, it brings up at the top here the search facility, and I've just typed in the first 5 or 6 characters, and it automatically highlights for you those bookmarks which so far match what you're doing. And of course, you can go ahead and type the whole lot if you want to, but it's usually quicker just to jump to the one that has come up so far. And then that takes you to just where you want to be. So really useful if you're doing, for instance, which you're not going to be doing, but people who do parish council meetings and need to review several planning applications, this is a very quick way of going exactly to the right spot. There is another caveat, which is that the bookmarks are specific to the account that you're logged into at the time. So if you want to share those bookmarks with other people, which I'm frequently doing, you have to have a user account that's common to all the people who will be using them. And I just call, I always log in as the entire parish council, and everybody else in the parish council can log in on that as well. Incidentally, in Parish Online, it's a multi-user system. So if you all log in with the same login name, it's quite happy with that. No problem at all.
Okay.
But the issue is, of course, that if you don't use a common login like this, then you're
You'll
the only
see
person
something
who can
different.
see. Yeah, well, or you're the only one that can see your bookmarks.
Yep.
So if bookmarks are something that you want others to use, you have to use an account that they will have access to. So that's bookmarks. Going on to the next item is the coordinate finder. And this is when someone has sent you coordinates either in what's called British National or something or other format. We'll cut that in a minute, or they do the lat long that you're used to. You may well be used to lat long as degrees, minutes, and seconds. But this system operates only on decimals, so you have to convert that to decimals.
Okay.
And I've in the presentation, when you get it, there's a link that takes you to a place that does that.
Okay.
So if I click on the coordinate finder, British National Grid, that was the word I was looking for. So they give eastings and northings which don't bear resemblance to any physical numbers that you would recognize. They're just sort of taken from the map. But you can select up here lat long, and it comes up with numbers that you'll recognize, although you have to recognize that they're in decimals. So if you're using what's called the WGS84 format, then that says anywhere to the right of Greenwich is positive, but anywhere to the west is negative. So you have to remember to put in your northing with a minus sign if you're using WGS84, which you often will be. If someone just sends you a straightforward lat long, you select the lat long coordinate type. And again, it'll have to be a decimalized number. So I've given you this link here, which takes you to a place that will take any lat long and decimalize it for you. So just to give you an example, whoops, blimey, went a bit far there, sorry. So we've typed in or been given this particular easting and this particular northing, which is the British National Grid format. And you notice these numbers bear no relationship to your latitude or your longitude. And there's no minus sign to indicate that we're going west, but we are going west. This is in Long Sutton, which is in Somerset, which was last seen west of Greenwich. Who knows what people are doing nowadays, but at the moment we're west of Greenwich. Okay. And it happens to be our church. So if I do the same thing with the WGS84 format, which is this one, then you see our longitude is a minus number, and it now is in a recognizable format. So we are at latitude 51 north, and we are at longitude 2 degrees west, or nearly 3. At our sort of latitude, we're approximately 60 miles per degree. So, you know, we're 2.57 west, so we're something like 140 miles west of London, or at least Greenwich. So that's the straightforward coordinate finder if someone gives you coordinates, but sometimes you want to give the coordinates of a feature to somebody else. And you get that by right-clicking on whatever object it is. So you can go to any object within Parish Online, do a right-click, and up pops this little mini menu. And if you select copy, up will come another mini menu, and you can choose your coordinates. And what it means by coordinates is this is the British National Grid coordinate, and this is the lat long coordinates. Extent is just the bottom left corner and the top right corner, so that anybody else can bring up exactly the same picture that you're looking at. But again, I'm not aware of anybody that's used that in action, but it is available. So that is coordinates. If you go back up to the view menu, the next item is legend, and legend is about the colors that you tend to see on maps. And you only get a legend if you're working in a layer in which colors are used to differentiate items. Otherwise, you don't need a legend. So what we're going to do is go back to the main screen, turn on a layer that uses colors, and we're going to choose addresses. So I'm just going to click here in the address list, and we get the two choices, address plus points or postcode areas, and we're going for plus points. And what that does is turn on an address system for every building in the country. It's a magnificent system. And the dots are color coded. So if you want to find out what the color code is, you go to View Legend, and you go View Legend, and it pops up in the left column with all the color schemes.
Yep.
Okay. So straightforward, but very useful. All right. So just to recap where we are, we've done the first two items, the hamburger and the view. Next one in the list is print. So when you want to do a printout of the map, it helps if you're in the right place to begin with. So I'm just suggesting that we scroll around till we find somewhere. I'm going to do a print for this example of the center of our village. So I've put the sort of crossroads in the center of the village, roughly in the center of the map, and you click on the print menu, and it very nicely highlights for you what's going to appear when you print this out. And you can now adjust the scale and the scroll of this. If it's not quite what you wanted, just move it about until it is. Then on the left-hand side, you've got some choices, which I think we go through on the next slide. So, yep. You can put in a title, and you'll see where that's useful when we do the print, and literally a description, which is a bit like the description you put into a new layer. You have a choice of A4 or A3, landscape or portrait, and a planning application only applies if you're putting in a planning application from your council to the local planning authority, which is not something we've used a lot. Okay. So for today's example, we're leaving it as A4 landscape. And then you can choose whether you want a PDF output or a PNG output. So people who are doing neighborhood plans who want to work with graphics files, it helps to output as a PNG. But for most other people, a PDF is fine. It's very convenient, and they get exactly what you're intending them to get. You have some choices as before. We discussed legend. If you want the legend to be there, it can be. We're going to put in a north arrow. You can hide the author's name should you wish to, if you're sort of a shy person, and I'll discuss toggle mask a bit more in a few seconds. Okay. So with these, we then click on print, and it whirs away to itself. Well, you can't actually see it's doing anything. It tells you it is, and if you're lucky, there's going to be a little circle of whiz going around here, and you just sit there, bearing in mind that this is going on up in the cloud until it comes down to you. I don't know if I mentioned the fit up here. I think I may discuss it later, but you have a choice of scale. So if someone says, can you give me a 1 in 250,000 scale map of the center of the village, you can say yes. But if they say, I want to see these things in the map, and there's one that's lying just outside that particular scale, you can put in your custom scale and just adjust it by a thousandths here or there, and it'll squeeze everything in where you want it. So when it comes up and says it's stopped printing, you get the title here. If you didn't put in the title, you'll get some computer name document. I mean, you'll recognize it, but it'll sort of have a time and a date and all sorts of weird things on it. And you'll notice that now the print screen is highlighted, but that is irrelevant. What you're going to do is click on this little icon, which links you to the PDF file that you've chosen. So it pops up like this. So it's got a frame around it. It's got your title. It's got your description. It's got where it is, who the author is. In this case, you can see I logged in as my parish council account, and the date when I did it. It's got a north-facing arrow. Yep. And it's built in a copyright license notice, which is required by the Ordnance Survey. So the system does that for you. Okay. Which means that this is now a legal document. You can send it anywhere you like without any fear of upsetting the lawyers at Ordnance Survey. So you have two choices. You can just download it in the usual way as a file, which you can then sort of email off to people, or you can be really old-fashioned and go to a printer and print it out on paper and hand it to the hikers who are sitting waiting in your office because they've asked you for a map of the local footpaths. And so it goes. So okay, I discussed printing scale here. You can choose whatever scale you like, and you can choose a a custom user scale if you want to sort of fiddle around. If 1 in 5,000 is not as good as for you as 1 in 4,900, so the 4,900. The toggle mask is a very useful thing if you're trying to highlight your particular parish. So the toggle mask only works around the parish boundaries, and it will differentiate between your particular parish and the ones outside it. So you can choose to have the ones outside in a different color, or you can have them darker or lighter, or you can have them all looking exactly the same. It's a matter of choice, and it can be useful, but I think most people just, occasionally we get people calling up and saying, why does my printout actually come out as much lighter and less colorful than what's on the screen? And it's because they've got the toggle mask on when they really ought to be off. So we've now done the first 3 menus. Next on the list is table. Table is extremely useful for exporting data out of Parish Online. So I'm just going to click on table here, and it pops up with this screen for you and says, what layer do you want a table from? And you just click on the down arrow and select whatever one you want. For argument's sake, we're going to select allotment plots today. And immediately it pops up with everything you've got on all of your allotments. Now, depending on how busy you are, this can be hundreds of records, or it could be 3, or it could be none. In my case, it's 6. And you can see all the stuff here, very useful. If you want to drill down into finer detail, you can click on which column you want to drill down on. I'm going to click on the ID. So I do that. Here you have what choice of filter do you want, and we're going to go with contains, and then you put the value that you want here. And because I want to see just those records with GSS in their ID, we leave it as that and click on, well, I say export, but anyway, you click on export. And up comes just the 2 with the GSS. So you can drill down to whatever you like. You can put in multiple choices. So if you click on this little box up here, you can say, I want 1 item. Well, we're going to put in 2 more words. I'm going to put in long. I'm going to put in plots. So you can see I've done just that. Save that, and bang, the system comes up with any record that has in its ID the word long or plots. Clever, huh? So when you've got here, you can then export it if you wish to, just into a CSV file, which can be extremely useful.
Okay.
There's a few more things. So you can use this as an editor. So if you decide that all these agreements have now expired and they got re-signed on the 1st of January 22, you can just change each one of these here very quickly. Saves you having to go into each individual record any other way. It's very fine. My warning note here is that if you've got a required type like we were discussing yesterday, which may well be this one here, you can't enter null data. You're going to have to put in something that matches the requirement. But that's unusual. I don't think you usually run into that. Anyway, there's more to come.
Okay.
So this is one of my favorite projects. So having got all of your selected plots up in the table, you can say, I have no idea where this is, so show me. So you highlight this particular record and you click view on the map, and bang, it comes right up with it. And then you can, you can probably zoom out a little bit so you can find out where the heck this is. It makes no sense on this scale, but that's what it came up to. So, and the last thing you want to do is, or you may want to do, is to export the data, as I discussed. You can, and it'll export according to your filter. So if you've got filters in line, then it'll obey those. But if you have no filter in place, it'll export everything. And then, of course, once it's a spreadsheet, you can play around with it as you will. It does ask you when you click on export, do you want to include the metadata? So the metadata is all the funny stuff about when you last updated this record, who it was created by, this sort of stuff over here. If you don't want any of that in your spreadsheet, you can just ignore it, which is the default, because most people don't want it, but it is there. It's possible to get it if you want to. And we click on export. It says you're ready to go, you download it, and then you can do whatever you like with it. So first 4 menus covered. Next one
Okay.
is tools. So we get 4 options in tools. The first one being measure. So unsurprisingly, I'm going to click on measure. And up pops in the left-hand column this little choice. You say, are you going to measure length? Or are you going to measure area? For this exercise, we're going to do length. And then it says, what sort of unit do you want the lengths to be in? And I'm just going to go for straightforward lengths. I think they have funny things in there like rods and chains and perches and poles and things.
Good God.
Yeah, I think there's at least, I think for allotment plots, they're all measured nowadays in rods. So you need to have the
Are
rods.
they really? Okay.
Yes. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, and if you want to know, the average plot in England is about 2.5 rods. So
Okay.
I'm reminding you, really useful information.
Well, yes, but one of my parish council colleagues is actually in the process of setting up an allotment.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
So this will come in extremely useful if he does the training.
Well, if he doesn't, tell him the fastest way of getting allotments in is to turn on the overhead photography, and then it shows you where every plot is. You can just outline the plots. You've then got all of your plots in Parish Online. Anyway, for the exercise here, we're going to measure the length of the road from that point down to that point.
Okay.
So to measure it, bearing in mind we've already selected the length, all you do is put your mouse on the top corner and click once. And then same as before, you just pull it down and you do a click each time you want to change direction until eventually you end up at the bottom and you do a double click and it instantly tells you to 4 places of decibels that that's what you want to do. If you need it more accurately than that, zoom in. So same as we discussed yesterday, if you want to be really accurate in Parish Online, zoom in and you start adjusting things in centimeters.
Yep.
Not really necessary for this sort of distance. I'm sure 1951 is an accurate enough measurement for you. If you wanted to do area, same argument, you just select the area tab. You get the same choice of what you wanted to be measured in, but the default is square meters. It's very much like drawing your polygon yesterday. Put your mouse in the top corner, click once, and then move it around the area you're measuring until you finish with a double click. And again, you may get an instant readout of how many square meters it is. Very useful. And in the 3 dots here, you've got some sub-menus of whether you want to save the information or whether you want to annotate it or get rid of it. So that's the measurement. Now we're going to do isochrones. They're sort of different, really, isochrones. You have a choice of measuring whether you want to cover cars, walking, or bicycling. And then you also have a choice of what 3 periods of time do you want to measure. It defaults to 5, 15, and 30, but you have the choice of making these whatever you wish. And you also need to say, so where am I going to start this isochrone? So I've chosen the crossroads in the middle of the village as our starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And up in the top left, right here, there's a link to the excellent isochrone explanation in the knowledge base. Knowledge base is pretty good in most areas anyway, but there are a couple of places where it excels, and this is one of them. All right, so what happens? You come up with this when you click on go, and it's a little bit confusing, but there are 3 separate zones here. Green is the 5-minute interval, brown is the 15-minute interval, and 30 is the 30-minute interval. Sorry, pink is the 30-minute interval. And this is basically the distance you can expect to cover in the vehicle of your choice in those time frames. And the difference between this and just a plain sort of circle of diameters that say in 5 minutes you can go this far, in 15 minutes that far, this takes account of the geological features. So if there's a road and you're driving by car, you obviously travel a lot faster, but when the road deteriorates into a track or disappears altogether, then you can't go anything like as far here as you can go up there when there's great big roads all the way. So that's what this is showing you, how far you can go with the mode of transport you've chosen, bearing in mind the geology that you're walking over or the topography that you're passing over in the meantime. So of interest to weird groups like hikers, ramblers, and other sorts of odd bodies. All right, into annotate. this is really useful, Nick, because you can say something like, show me all the names of all the houses within 500 meters of the center of the village. That may be important to you, but you can sort of run any variation on that you like. So we click on annotate, and will list here any annotations that are already in effect, but for clarity, I've said none. So you click on new object to start afresh. And then you say, what sort of annotation are you going to be working with? And this is very misleading because you might argue that this is a circle, but it isn't. You know perfectly well it's a point. Yes. This is a line, this is a polygon, and this unbelievably is a label. Yeah, a label. So we're going to say we want to draw a circle, and therefore we'll click on a polygon. That's the way it works, right? So we click on a polygon, and then it says, do you want to use a circle? And I will say, yes, please. And then it will say, well, how big a circle, which will be on our next screen. But at the moment, it says, what color do you want the circle and how transparent do you want it to be? And the line around the outside of the circle, what color do you want and how large do you want it to be? And are we going to use a label? And we're going to say yes. So I click on the label box, I click on the use circle box, and we move on to the next screen. And you'll see that it's drawn a 500-meter circle because I put in 500-meter radius here. Okay. It has indeed used the red color. It has indeed used the black outline, and it has indeed put this label right in the middle of the annotation. Very convenient. We're now going to click on finish. And remember, the question was, show me the houses within 500 meters of the village center, not just the houses, but with their addresses. So we now go into the data record for this particular annotation, which means you click on it. And lo and behold, as always, the column changes to the data record. And you can now move up to these little 3 dots. First time, I think, that we've been going to use these. Click on that.
Sorry, Graham, was that a right click on the circle?
No, just an
ordinary click.
Yep.
Okay.
Same way you always bring up a data entry, is to always left click on something.
Okay.
So in this choice of 3 little dots, you have data extract, and we're going to click on that, and it says extract from what. So you select a layer, and I've selected address plus points. I'm not going to bother filtering it because the annotation itself is the filter. So now I'm going to click on run. And bingo, it's come up with the address of every house within 500 meters of the center of the village. I'm sure you can imagine scenarios when this could be really useful.
Indeed.
So often what one does is select the parish itself and say, how many houses are there in our parish? Well, you can just click on the borders of the parish and away you go. So that's, you then can export this bottom left corner as a CSV file for you to play around with your spreadsheet or your notepad or whatever else. Okay, so I'm indicating here, do please go to the knowledge base to find out about annotate, because there are lots of ways of using it. And it's much more than I can cover in this sort of brief session, but this is pointing you in the right direction.
Okay.
And then we come down now to the asset register export, which is potentially fabulous, but hasn't quite got there yet. And you'll see why. So when I click on the export, it comes up with this and says what format you want it in. And the format we all want it in is CSV, so that we can use this as a spreadsheet. That's on its way, but it hasn't happened yet. The little down arrow steadfastly refuses to show you anything other than PDF. Okay. We just can't wait for it to become a CSV. By default, every layer in your asset register is selected. So if you only want to do 1 or 2 layers, you click on the down arrow here, up come all the layers, and you deselect the ones that you don't want. Then generate report, and it's like the other sort of generation. It sits there and spins away to itself, apparently doing nothing, but actually going frantically paddling around in the circle of the vast cloud. It will, in due course, highlight the open button so that you can go and take a look at it. So I've done that for you here. Click on open, And here is our PDF, which is every page from the asset register, all nicely laid out, beautiful for you to send to your 3 competitive quotes from different insurance companies. They have a list of precisely what it is that you want them to insure. So very good precision stuff. And once you built the asset register, it only takes a few seconds to generate this report. So it's really useful. But I do wish it was a CSV file. We have asked them, they are working on it, and they will get to it eventually, but it hasn't appeared yet. So again, just an update, we've done all these menus. The next one would be create, but because we're going to be using create later, we're going to jump over it to search. And search is this big white box, top right corner. And the down arrow, you have 2 choices. You can search by address space, or you can search by postcode. I'm going to do postcode first. So I've selected postcode. I've typed in somewhere on the East Coast, Norwich way, and it immediately puts a dot right in the middle of that postcode. So if you want to look at your great-great-great-grandmother's house up in the northern Yorkshire moors, you will, of course, remember that she was given a postal code back in 1743, and that postal code has lived through all the way through to the 22nd, 21st century, wherever we are now. Anyway, it's very useful if you do know a postcode of jumping straight to it. You know, even if it's at the other end of the country, it's more or less instantaneous, which can be very useful indeed. If you want to see what Edinburgh looks like, type in ED1 and you'll be there. So that was using the postcode. If I now go in and say I actually want to use the address space, I type in the beginning of an address that I used to live in, and it's what's the word that they use? It's sort of well, it sorts as it goes along any matches that it finds. So I didn't have to type more than a few words of my address before it found the only match for it, and therefore I can just go and select it, and bang, here it is. So you can search by address, you can search by postal code, very useful. One thing that often gets missed out is that how do you get rid of this once it's up there? Well, you can click on the X, or for some strange reason, if your cursor happens to be near the bottom of the screen, you can click on this first entry here, which says clear search text. Now, it often doesn't say that. It usually says which username you've logged in as. But when you've got something in the text box, it changes. So this is a variable feature. It changes at will, or rather not your will, but their will. Okay, so next choice is services, which is this cogwheel. We touched on this yesterday when doing layers. So we're going to go into administration. And it will, of course, in due course, fill up with layers, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to look at the other things. So here it has filled up, but since we're discussing the layers later, we're now going to click on My Organization. And all this is where you store the PSGA number for your particular license of Parish Online. And then it tells you whether you have or have not also subscribed to the Aerial Photography of Great Britain database, which you've all done. So I just mentioned this in passing. Next one we want to talk about is users. This is where you edit existing ones or add new ones or delete existing ones. So take Tony's, for instance. We've highlighted it once by clicking on it, and his details will appear there as soon as I go to the next slide. So here is the details for Tony. You can get him to reset his password if he's forgotten it, or you can delete him if you don't like him any longer. Or this is the opportunity to add a new person, which you do by clicking on the plus sign. And then lots and lots of required fields, new users. So you want to create a name for him as a unique user in Parish Online. You give him obviously first and last name, you can give him an email address, and you can give him what type of user he is. Now, I've put a link in here for you in the presentation to the knowledge base where they discuss type quite quickly, but just for your purposes, there are 5 or 6 types of user. The basic one is read-only, which is pretty self-explanatory. Next one up from there is editor, which he can edit an existing layer, but he cannot add a new one. Next one beyond that is data manager, who can do everything except go into billing. And for that, you have to be the administrator.
Okay.
So not very complicated, really. Public maps is arguably the best feature within Parish Online. It's fabulous. It's so good that I dedicate an entire session to it. So you pay your money and you make your choice. Since you guys have already paid for an annual subscription to training, you can click for as many of these as you've got time for. I love public maps. It's by far the best feature, I think, within here. So the last choice is billing. And again, this just tells you when your renewal date is and how much it's going to cost you. In our case, we bought our Parish Online via BHIB, which means they paid it for us. And so they've taken away our fee and we're not going to have to pay anything. And this is who they charge, or rather whom they send the email to. And that's now way out of date. So I better go and change that. Right. Same as usual, go back to the globe icons to take us back to the maps. We're still on services. The second choice is help and support. This is where you go into the knowledge base. Okay. So clicking on help and support takes you to the global screen, if you will. It does say XMAP, but it's mostly for Parish Online. And if you type in your search question here, it will automatically go into knowledge base for you. Or you can just say, I'm going to click here and move on to the knowledge base, which we'll do on the next slide. I mentioned here that there's a community forum. This is a pretty new facility within Parish Online. It hasn't really got going yet, but the idea is that if you're working and you come across something that stumps you, you can come straight into the forum, and it's a bit like Facebook or something like that. You can ask your question, and anyone who's online will come back and answer you if they know the answer. The system also generates an email that goes to people like me, and I get an email that says, Nick is absolutely stuck. And you think, blimey, I covered that in the last lesson. Doesn't he pay any attention to anything? But I'll come online and say, Nick, come on, you know better than this. So community forum is helpful. The more people use it, the better it will be. It's still early stages, so I'm trying to encourage people to get into it. If you go on the knowledge base, it comes up with all the usual sorts of things. You can choose what you want if you know what you want, but if you can't find it, just search for it. And it comes up with almost anything. It's pretty good knowledge base, this one. It's new. It's about 6 months old. The previous one was a bit ropey, so they've improved it immensely with this one. What you get is, in most topics, quite an excellent video of how to do what you're doing. And then you also get a step-by-step text. If you are not the sort of person that absorbs information from videos, some people like the step-by-step stuff. It's less confusing and more timely. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Sorry, just going back to that page.
Yep.
We have a sign in and a sign up.
Yes. So the first time, funnily enough, you think this is part of Parish Online, but it isn't. It's actually a completely separate application. So you need to sign up for it in the first instance, and you just log in as yourself with your usual email address is fine. And then you, having signed up, you then use that login in the future to sign in each time. The system remembers you actually with cookies and so forth. So once you've done it once, you don't need to do it again. But that's what it's for. Thank you for pointing that out. I need to cover that in the future. So thank you. All right. We're now going to get to the bit where you do all the work and I sit back and drink coffee if I had any, but I don't. What we're going to do is create two layers, a point layer and a line layer. We're going to add a feature to each one. And we're going to edit each one, and then we're going to demonstrate all three of them in effect together. Okay, so the next slide is completely worthless to you because you've already done it. The This is a repeat recently, but I'll just give it to you in case you need reminding. So parish layers is where we create the infrastructure for the data that you add as features. So the layer consists of one type of geometry, points or lines or polygons, and you can only have one type of geometry per layer.
Yep.
And you're going to create columns. We're going to use, for clarity's sake, Nick, exactly the same as yesterday. So 3 columns of name, date, and status. Status will have exactly the same 3 addressable values, or whatever the word is, allowed values of, not yet started, in, under construction, and finished. And then we'll add data. If you can, when you add the data to the system, or the feature, sorry, it would help if you put it in roughly the same place as you put yesterday's polygon. Only because when we do showing you all 3 layers on at once, it obviously helps if you're looking at the same place for all of them.
Okay.
So I think I put up on the screen, yes, something that you need to do. And you're going to go ahead and do all of these things. And I'm going to say, it's all yours, buddy. If you need help, just shout. But the next slides along here are just repeats really of what you did yesterday. I don't think you will need to have repeats, but again, just give me a shout if you run into issues. Just if you would please go ahead and indicate and create the 2 new layers of point and line.
Okay. There's new layer, wasn't it?
Create new layer, that's right. Yep.
Right, then in this I've add.
Yep.
And then confirm. And there's 3 items there, and then finish.
Perfect. And then same again with the other layer.
Oh, you want me to create the other layers straight away?
If you would, yes, please. Yep.
And is this in Nick Test 2? Is it totally new?
I would, yes, you can call, what I do is say that the first one was called Nick Test, or sorry, Graham Test Polygon, then Graham Test Line and Graham Test Point. But that's only just to make it clear to me when I'm showing people what sort of layer it is. You can just call it 1, 2, and 3, whatever you wish.
Right.
Okay, so if you can just switch back to my Zoom screen, Nick. This is one of those things where, why the hell didn't I tell you this earlier, that you say? So you've just created 2 layers, or actually 3, with exactly the same allowed values in each. If you know you're going to be doing this, or you have maybe sort of 15 or 20 allowed values that you'd like to be in there, it's quite quick to just put all the allowed values in a text editor, Notepad or something like that, or Pages in Mac. And just put each value on a separate line, then copy and paste the whole lot into the first equals box that comes up when you do allowed values, and it will allocate them each to its own line. And you've done the whole lot in one go. And then you can just repeat it for each separate layer that you're doing. So you with me? So you've got 3 values under construction, not yet started and finished. You could put those into 3 lines in a regular text editor. Just copy and paste them into the allowed values box when it comes up the first time. And it will do all 3 or 4 or 5 or however many you've got in there at one go. You don't have to keep typing them.
Okay.
So it's just a time saver for future use.
Mhm.
But what I'm a masochist, you see. No, not a masochist, the other one, a sadist. And what I do is make you go through all the work of creating 3 separate lists. And then I said, you didn't need to do that, you know.
Oh, well.
So, all right, now we've got back to the main menu. You should see all 3 layers now. You got Nick's test 1, 2, and 3 under your parish layers.
Mhm.
Okay, so for future reference, we would do the required files, but to save time for not, you just remember how to do that. But I'm going to zip over that because I'm sure you remember how to do required values. Basically, you're just going to go into the administration layer, click on the layer that you've got, and then select the columns. So I'm assuming you've done it, even though you haven't. And what we're going to do now is add the data for each of your 2 new layers in the same place that you did it before. So I've come back to my recreation ground where I created my pavilion yesterday, and I'm now going to go into it, unless you say you go into it with your point layer. And what I'd like you to do is to just put a point in somewhere near the pavilion. It doesn't need to be on it or in it, just somewhere near it. So you may recall, to do that, to add a feature, you right click in your Nick test point layer and do add feature. And don't forget to put a name in, even though we haven't made the box required yet, but you need to put a name in. And then you can just move the cursor over to near your pavilion and add a dot. Just click once.
Yep.
Save it.
Yep.
Right now, switch to a different layer. The system will have given you a new blank record. You can go up to the very top where it says layer and change it to Nick test line. And then add a new record, give it a line, a name, something like footpath, and then move your cursor to the point that you created with the previous feature, and use that as the starting point for your footpath. And just draw a footpath anywhere you like and end up in the pavilion. And when you end up in the pavilion, then just double click it.
Okay.
Right, so that information is not much use to anybody if you have each layer on individually on their own. But when you turn all 3 layers on, then suddenly it makes sense. And it doesn't make any difference to the system how many layers you have, but it does make the point that for clarity of presentation, if you want to show what's going to be going on in the recreation ground, you're going to create a pavilion, you're going to create a footpath that leads to the pavilion from wherever the existing entry gate is to the field, whatever, then people can see exactly what you're doing because you've drawn it for them in 3 separate types of layers, 1 polygon, 1 point, and 1 line. And that was the point of this evening's exercise, just really to show you all three. I mentioned to you that by going into edit mode, which is just clicking on any one of those items, it'll bring up the column on the left, and then you click on the pencil to go into edit mode. That's where you would either add attachments so you can sort of put nice little things like planning permissions or what's the word, budget forecasts and so forth for the cost of each item in there, and then you can just show all three put together. That sort of thing. Or this is where you would delete your layer your feature if you've had enough of it. If you've had enough of the layers altogether and you want to delete the entire layer, you do that through administration, go into layers, click on the layer you want to remove, and then just click on the dustbin and it's gone. The system does ask you to confirm each time that you really do want to do this. So it's pretty safe. Something that I wanted to touch on at the end of this session really is that Parish Online is very forgiving. So it's very flexible. If you don't have to get the design right at the very first instance, where I sort of have a quick and dirty suggestion to people that they just create what they want to get a rough idea of what they do, and they can say, well, actually, I've got the date in there, but I haven't got the starting date when the the bulldozers first moved in, and I haven't got the finish date when the whole lot got ready to do commissioning. So you can go back and add columns later. You can go back and change the names of columns or the names of the data that you put in there. The system is very forgiving for that. And finally, again, when you're drawing a feature, particularly if it's a boundary. So for instance, we were talking about annotating the parish boundary so you could count the number of houses within it. The simplest way of doing that, and most boundaries squiggle all over the place, is just to do a quick and a dirty line that runs roughly around your boundary, and then go back into edit mode later and just tidy it up. It's much quicker that way. I learned that the very hard way. I tried to get it all perfect the first time round, and inevitably I'd make a mistake. And by the time I'd sort of worked out how to get rid of the mistake, I'd lost the whole lot and had to start again. So quick and dirty to get the total picture, and then go in and clean it up in edit mode later, probably at a much higher scale, because it's much easier to follow the traceries of the parish boundaries when you've zoomed in and you can just see the quarter mile that you're dealing with now. But when you're drawing the whole thing in the first place, you've got to see the entire parish all in one go. It's much quicker, much easier.
Indeed.
Now, I think, have actually got to the end of this particular session. Let me just see, you've done all these. I'm just zooming through. If you're back on my screen and just going through the rest of the screws. Yep, done that. Yep. And you can see all this in slow time if you want to when I send you the presentation, but there's nothing here that you haven't touched on already or we haven't discussed in going. Yep. So the last screen on the screen, sorry, the last slide on the screen at the moment just says what we've done. And points you yet again to the knowledge base, which is a good place for help. And then we have a Q&A session where you can bombard me with everything you want, and I'll turn off my sharing screen so that we can see each other. And you may have no questions at all, or you may have hundreds of them.
Again, very useful, thank you. I don't have any specific questions. I will go on and sign up for the knowledge base.
Okay.
It seems, the right thing to do.
Oh, yes, you're going to make big use of that, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I should mention in the knowledge base, and I don't know why I keep forgetting to do this, you can open a ticket if you want.
Mhm.
So if you can't find the answer to your question, simply open a ticket and say, I want to do this. How do I do it? And they'll come back to you. And they're very quick at answering tickets. You usually get an answer in less than an hour.
And this is a team behind the.
Exactly.
Nice.
These are the Geosphere people themselves.
Yeah.
There's a lady called Olivia Gould who is probably in her late 20s, but looks about 12. It seems to be the way nowadays. The older I get, the younger they get. But she's extremely helpful. Well, all of them are. There's no exceptions. They're all very helpful people in Geosphere. And then you've also got the user group, which is usually myself. Just send me an email if you're having an issue. I'd be happy to step in and point you in the right direction.
Okay.
I'm not sure if anyone's told you that Fairfield has bought an annual subscription to training, which means that you can call me up and ask me a question any time of the day or night that you'd like.
No, I got them to do that a couple of months back.
Oh, that was your instances. Well, okay, well, that's wonderful. So it was Katrina, I think, I was talking to.
Yes. No, I had just been made redundant from my role, which is not a nice thing, but so I'd noticed that you did all this training, and I put it on the parish council agenda to something I would find useful, and I'm sure some of the other guys and girls would find useful. And then when it actually came to the vote, I'd been rehired. So,
yeah, lovely.
Which is a great position to be in, but
yes,
kind of stymied the training. But I can do the training in the evenings. It's not a problem.
There's no problem for me. I'm happy to do that. I would have thought that of all the people, Katrina herself would be a big benefactor of this.
Yeah, I'm going to have the chat with her because she doesn't seem to want to bother.
Well, no, and that's because they're always so overworked and so busy. They haven't got the time to start something new.
Yep.
And it's the usual thing. You've got to convince them that the extra couple of hours they put in now will save them hundreds of hours later.
Yes.
But, just clicking on one button to print out your asset register is a beauty.
It'd be so helpful to her. Yes.
Yeah, and having all of the records for anyone, your park bench that needs maintaining and painting and inspecting and checking and so forth, to have all the reports on that through the years in one spot is a huge time saver, instead of having to go through 62 filing cabinets.
And she doesn't have to have a filing cabinet either.
Exactly. No keys to lose.
No, one of the things that the guys have been talking about, Sean, who is keen to set up the allotments, Barry, who's Methuselah on the council, knows where all the bones are buried.
Right.
I told you yesterday about the strange setup here where we've got all these different management companies, and then you've got the parish council. And a lot of the residents do not know who is responsible for what. So it was a project that's kind of under consideration, is drawing up a map which basically shows who owns what bit of land.
How very convenient, yes.
And
a great idea.
That would be so useful. And before yesterday and today's session, I was not sure that could be done in Parish Online, but now I can see that it can be.
Yes, in fact, it would be very fast to say, the northwest corner is looked after by Fred, and the southeast corner is looked after by James.
Yep.
And there's probably Methuselah in there somewhere as well.
Because they were talking about paying this youngster to kind of do it, but they never came back with the figures. So if it's something that we can do, and it wouldn't just have to be me, we could all do it under a shared log on, then that'd be so much the better.
And also for more fun, if you will, Nick, we can say we'll have a session and you'll have you and two others online, and we'll go through it. How should we do this in Parish Online? Just have a mini project.
Right.
And I'll just work with you.
Fantastic. I'll mention that to the others.
Well, I think it's fun. It's interesting for me, and it's hopefully a great saver for you. Again, it doesn't sound as if this is your bailiwick, but we do have several parishes now which are running their entire parish council meetings in Parish Online. So everything is there, and the beauty of it is when you're doing a planning application and so forth, and the meeting votes on, are we going to support this application, or are we going to reject it, or what are we going to do with it? You log it right then and there. Yes. And because of public map, the public can see that decision within seconds up on the village website. So it's a really interesting communications tool as well as everything else. Okay. Anyway, I just mentioned that in passing, but I think it's lots of prospects for Parish Online, which people haven't really grasped yet.
No, absolutely.
Like Microsoft Office, people are all happy to use 10% of its cloud without any touching the other 90%. But the 90% can be quite useful.
If you don't know, you don't know. I'm head of the planning committee on the parish council, and I can see where this would be so useful.
What's even more useful, Nick, is if you can get your local planning authority to automatically export the data to you. So we've persuaded South Somerset District Council. Yep. They now they tie in their planning application database straight into Parish Online, and I can show you every single one of our planning applications for the last 10 years because we're plugged straight into their database. It's marvelous. And
they should be able to send those to you or to us.
They do. It's automatic. Right. If I'll show you if you like, but
if you've got time.
But it's very quick. So let's just share the screen. Let me go into my copy of Parish Online. Start, that'll do. That one will do. Keep going. So I'm part of South Somerset District Council. They put out these layers of data, and they've just added the planning applications for the public, which is polygons, and planning applications is points, depending on how you like to look at them. So if I just turn them on, there will be a while. This little symbol here says that you need to zoom in to see what's happening. Okay, they don't like working at this large scale. They like you to be working on a much smaller scale. So you zoom in until you suddenly start seeing things. I'm sorry, that sort of zoom. And then they start pouring in. So turn them on. There we go. Yep. So each one of these is a planning application. You can click on it and up will come the data for it. Well, in that case, it's a bit vague. Very vague in that case. Let's try something a bit different. How about that one? 52832. Well, there's a flaw in the system, but basically, we haven't touched on filters yet, but you can say the codes that they use are a bit esoteric, and you can say, show me all the existing open applications, or you can show me all the closed ones for the year of 2016 or whatever it happens to be. And they will all pop up. You'll filter out all these reds. You're seeing every application for the last decade. Okay. And you're only interested in the ones that are still unanswered. But you can filter those out. And let me just go back to here. So we're working much more closely with the county council, and they're putting out these layers, which are really, really helpful. I mean, catchment areas for the schools are of huge interest to parents.
They are.
And to just put those on the map, if I turn off this one and I turn on the catchment area, which is
a bus.
Thank you. Yep. So middle school catchments, we're going to need to zoom out a bit to find some around me. There aren't any middle school catchment areas around me. Let me turn off the boundaries. That confuses the issue. And off, right. Now let's see some schools anywhere. Let's come up to close that one, close that one, and then we're here. Try primary schools, and there we go. So these are the catchment areas for each primary school in the area. So you know what parents are like, they move to places in order to make sure they're in the catchment area for a specific school.
Indeed, they do.
So this is a great interest to people. Public rights of way are footpaths, and they save a lot of trouble. And then highway lighting was one we specifically asked for. And gullies was one that I didn't know about, but you know, which gullies does the Somerset County Council take responsibility for in your particular area? Very helpful.
That's the dream, yes.
And just to give you an idea of scale, all right, there is a unitary in North Somerset called Bath and North East Somerset, which everyone shrinks down to Baines. Baines worked out 10 years ago that it is less expensive to them to give everybody a free copy of Parish Online and have them answer their own questions than for them to man telephones when people say, does this footpath go there or does it go there? And what they did, they said, we'll give you the map, you work out the answers for yourself, and we'll pay for Parish Online. And that was so effective, it was so fiscally obvious that they've done it for 10 years. But over time, they now export 400 layers constantly to Parish Online. So if you're in the Baines area, not only do you automatically get a free copy of Parish Online, every single parish within the Baines area gets a free copy, but you're getting 400 layers of data that the unitary is keeping. Wow. So that's what we're aiming for. So we've got 10 from Somerset County Council and we've got 8 from our district council. So there's a long way to go, but they all started off with 0. So and as I think we touched yesterday on the fact that once you've told them what it is you're looking for and how easy it is to get it, then they're very, very helpful. But even more helpful is the fact that Geosphere do all the work. They say, look, tell us where the database is. We'll go into it. We'll set it up so it exports the information. It won't take you any effort at all. All you need to do is give us the permissions briefly. And it takes them 3 minutes. And it takes most, Somerset County Council says, well, we can't do that. We haven't got the time. We haven't got the resources. And they were flabbergasted. And I said, I will solve that problem. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
And so Geosphere is obviously hugely in their interests to have as many county councils and district councils using the system as possible. So they do it for you for free. Yes. It's brilliant. It's one of their strong points, I think. Well, I think the whole product is a strong point, but they help by being very cooperative themselves.
No, that was so interesting, so useful. It is something I can work on.
Yeah, well, the public rights of way. Have you seen the public rights of way? I mean, they're marvelously helpful.
Nope.
Look at that. See, so that's just where they are, and then as you zoom in, you start getting ID numbers on them. So they haven't got there yet. There we go. We're beginning to get an ID number on each. I still need to go one more further. There we go. So each of your path. Now, this is the number by which the county council tracks the path. So when you tell them, look, up here, you've got this path going here. It's going right through the middle of the lake. You don't know there's a lake there, and you ought to. So they say, okay. And this can be a two-way data flow. If you get a really trusting district council, which is rare, but you work on it together, and they say, well, look, you're the locals, you know where the path goes, make the change and we'll accept it in our database. And that's really sensible because the locals love to say, yeah, we know what's going on. You don't.
Absolutely.
You're sitting there in your ivory tower 60 miles away, and we're standing right here on the ground, and we can tell you that this footpath is actually 200 yards that way. And they go ahead and move it, and it gets changed up at the county level. Fabulous.
Yep.
So lots of scope for improving the way that local government works. And it's amazingly time and money saving, although Katrina hasn't realized that yet.
No, that's fascinating. Okay.
Okay, well, Nick, it's been fun. If you don't have any more questions.
No. I
Good
just
luck.
need to book up some more sessions now.
Yes, well, I'll plot the August ones tomorrow. I'll put them up there.
Fantastic.
Right.
All
Great
right.
to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for your time, and I'll see you soon.
Lovely. Take care, Nick. No,
And you.
bye-bye.